All right, hello everybody. This is Tori O'Neill, and I'm here with Shama Co. And we are having a real talk about sexual predators. So this is going to be very much unlike any of the other ones that we've done in the past, but we felt that this is a critical conversation that we should be having, especially as our sport continues to grow and we're welcoming more people inside of it. Sexual predators are a reality in every aspect in our world. And jiu-jitsu is not exempt from that. In the last decade or so, we're hearing stories come out about, the Team Lloyd Irvins, the Hickson Gracies, the Claudia Duval, and dozens of other, allegations of sexual assault and sexual violence. And that doesn't even count the dozens, if not hundreds of smaller academies where this is happening. Just because people aren't reporting, it's not meaning that these cases aren't happening. It's that survivors are staying silent. So the idea with this conversation is that we want to help erase some of that stigma and empower people to reach out for support and for others to step up and see how we can help people within our community.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a shame because it's like over and over again, these stories keep popping up and then just kind of swept under the rug. So that was something that was really important to us to kind of address and discuss today, and see how can we change this, right?
Yeah.
How can we how can we make it so that people are more comfortable coming forward and providing more support for them and getting some justice as well. It's really hard when you're coming forward and doing something that's hard by addressing it and then having people not believe you, right? So we have assembled an amazing group of people today who will be taking on this discussion with us. We hope to provide some new insight to build some kind of resolutions among this team so that we can share it with the rest of the community. So first up, we have Dominyka Obelenyte. She's a 5-time world champion black belt, head instructor at Hinds Combat Sports, and a huge advocate for women in jiu-jitsu, equality, someone that I've had this discussion with time and time again. We also have our second male ever featured on Real Talk. We have Ty Gay. Ty Gay yes. Ty Gay is a black belt owner instructor at Redline Jiu Jitsu. He's also been a huge advocate for women in jiu-jitsu, including discussing topics when it comes to sexual predators in jiu-jitsu and really kind of calling people out and bringing awareness to the predators within the community. Last but not least, we have Paola Diana. She's the author of Saving the World, Women, the 21st Century Factor for Change. And she's an advocate host for a show called Unleashed, the Game Changers. She's also a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. She was also the woman who brought the Claudia Duval story to the jiu-jitsu community, to the community as whole, front and center, and gave her a platform to share some really tough issues that impacted her directly. So we are really excited to see what you guys have to say. And I think this will be a wonderful discussion.
Yeah, as wonderful as you can have a discussion about a terrible, terrible topic.
Exactly.
Well, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. So one of the things when me and Shama were talking about this topic and some of the questions we had is whenever one of these instances come out, we see a little bit of support, but we see a lot of backlash for the victims. And I want to know is why do we see such a lack of support from within our community when it comes to victims that who finally do come forward about sexual assault allegations? Any one of you can take that one.
Yeah. The problem is always the same. It's not only the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community, it's actually everywhere. Seriously, still nowadays, victims of sexual abuse are blamed, are not believed instantly. Everyone is like, oh, give me the proof, show me the proof. But come on, let's be realistic. I mean, the majority of times we don't have proofs, because unless the woman goes around with a camera, I mean, how can you record this? Many times the aggressor waits for the victim to be alone. It definitely doesn't abuse her, in open air, at the restaurant. So it's a matter of believing women. That's the point. I think we have to believe women. Of course, we might have psychopaths who might invent a story, but this is the same for men, right? I mean, we could have the same, but the problem is that the big numbers are a reality. I mean, we have a problem, and the problem is that men, especially when they're powerful, like black belts in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, they tend to abuse that power in order to have a sexual, some kind of a sexual, act with a woman that many times is less powerful than them. So usually the victim is chosen very carefully. It's never someone in the same balance of power. But of course, I mean, better than me, maybe the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community, Dom and Ty. So you want to say something related to the community specifically?
Yeah. Well,
or go ahead, Ty.
Go ahead. Please do. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I really think it's a matter of seeing how these issues kind of arise, because as Paola said, it's usually somebody in the position of power trying to take over somebody else. So in like any kind of way, it can be a power trip in the actual academy that isn't sexual, and it can also be through sexual abuse. And unfortunately, jiu-jitsu gyms don't have an HR desk. They don't have a person to come up to and say, I'm being sexually harassed by my instructor, because the instructor is the guy overseeing the environment of the academy and the culture of the place. So when an accusation is put forward, usually, unfortunately, what happens, because there are so many people tied in with the instructor, and they feel like kind of how their instructor is viewed is also how they are viewed and how their jiu-jitsu gym is viewed, they tend to operate on the defensive, because they assume that if their instructor is guilty of doing something really heinous and terrible, they will be grouped in with that. So I think that's why you see a lot of people that don't have all the facts immediately laying down everything to defend their instructor, to defend their very accomplished teammate, or the guy that is going to be the next world champion, because they want to be associated with a group of people that is successful and ethical. They don't want to be grouped in with someone who could be a predator, and they assume that it's easier to kind of spend all of their energy in silencing or doubting the claims of somebody who really was abused.
I agree with that.
Okay.
But the problem is that if you don't denounce, and if we stay silent, things will repeat itself, because predators, they will never stop. And we saw it, outside the jiu-jitsu world. We are finding now predators in their, 70s, in their 60s, who did that for 30 years, 40 years. Can you imagine? It's disgusting. So that's why I think the first thing to do is speak up. That's the first thing. That's the way you change the dynamic, because you have to break the circle of silence.
Okay. Well, that's actually, that makes a lot of sense, that people don't want to be tied to like an unethical group, because they've, especially in jiu-jitsu, we seem to like tie our identity with our schools so deeply. People have tattoos of their schools on them. Just a quick follow-up on that is, we've seen cases though where it's been proven and these people have been arrested, and we've had a couple that happened here in Florida. And even when there's not a shadow of a doubt, we still see people who support, who are still saying, well, they'll be 18 in a year. But we still see that type of rhetoric. So it's shocking that it's still happening. So going to that, you, Paola, you talked about, we're seeing 70 and 80-year-old men who are coming out now who have been abusing people for 30 years. And that really ties into this idea that these people in power are really grooming people into this behavior. And, we think we know what grooming looks like, oh, clearly but we don't. So like, do any of you have what does grooming look like? And how can you tell that it's grooming versus, you know, someone who's very dedicated to their students? Do you have any warning signs or things we can look forwards to? I see Dom's hand fly up already.
A little bit on this. So when I was, really quick correction, Chalma, I'm a 4-time black belt world champion, not 5-time, but I've been in the jiu-jitsu game for a while, and I started competing when I was around 9, and I started participating in world championships when I was 12. So from the ages of 12 and 17, I was being exposed to the life of a jiu-jitsu athlete, which usually means being exposed to the higher athlete jiu-jitsu community, like all the black belts, the brown belts, the people that are going to be the next big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as a 16-year-old and 15-year-old, I ended up having a lot of interactions online and a lot of conversations with people that were much older than me that were tinging on inappropriate. And what started off as me having conversations with someone as like, wow, I can't believe I'm talking to this person. I look up to them. Their jiu-jitsu is amazing. Like, they're so cool. And I'm like a kid, you know, it's a part of me is also like, oh, I'm turning into a woman. I'm turning into an adult. So like, I'm having crushes on people, but I'm also still a child. But I'm thinking that because we have this big thing that unites us, this jiu-jitsu, our athletic careers, that we have a lot in common and we have a lot to talk about, and it's not that weird. And then slowly the lines begin to get blurred. Slowly the conversations start to veer towards the inappropriate, towards something that is more relating to me being sexualized. And I never saw it as a problem when I was 15 or 16. I always thought that it was okay or cool or even a little bit alternative and edgy for me to be talking to somebody that was not just in their 20s, but in their 30s. And looking back at it now, I'm kind of shocked by how callously those people that were engaging in those conversations with me behaved. And what really shocked me at the time when I was that age is when I would approach said people in person at a tournament, they would pretend like they didn't know me. They would completely they would turn it off entirely. What was a spontaneous, like, charismatic person over Messenger turned into somebody completely closed off and cold. And I was like, I wonder why. Maybe they're just a different kind of person in person. And then I realized they understood what they were doing was inappropriate. And they didn't want a paper trail of what was happening in front of them, especially around their group of people, around their friends, around their community of peers. So the grooming, it doesn't seem like anything to it didn't seem like anything to someone like me, but only when I turned into an adult and started really looking back at these conversations did I realize what was actually occurring. And it's kind of frightening how easily it can happen, how just starting a conversation or starting a dialogue about a UFC fight, and we all watch UFC, so wow, what do you think about that fight, can lead into something more sinister. So it's just it's like a matter of I guess as parents or as jiu-jitsu instructors that are trying to be aware of it happening, it's a matter of transparency with like kids and with teenagers. And it's a matter of having open conversations and dialogues about what is appropriate and inappropriate as a conversation or interaction or relationship between yourself and an adult.
Okay. Ty, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's terrifying. I think the internet has changed the game on a lot of things, you know. Kind of how I got involved was a black belt from Hickson named Brandon Hetzler had posted something on his Facebook page, and he wasn't really, he didn't really have as many followers as I did. I was in a band and stuff, so I had a lot more followers on social media and stuff, and he had said some stuff about Hickson having this guy named David Armbeck at his house who was on the sexual offenders list or whatever. So I started kind of digging into it, and I just couldn't figure out why he would let something like that happen. Because Hickson, to me, is kind of like Superman. You know, I grew up on the Hickson Gracie choke video and all that stuff. And I kind of met him a couple times in passing, but never really had to sit down with the guy. But I had met like almost all the other Gracies, you know, Hoyler and of course Tanner and Hedon are my instructors, and so all the Gracies are kind of intertwined, you know. And so I was blown away by this. But really, Hickson had just come out with this whole thing about he was bringing ethics back to jiu-jitsu, and he had this big long list for his Global Jiu-Jitsu Federation of how their, you know, jiu-jitsu's ethics were lost and all this kind of stuff. And then here he is with this guy who has committed a violent sexual act on a 14-year-old. His defense in court, by the way, was he was too drunk to remember. That's great. So yeah, it broke my heart. And so I made a video that kind of went viral, and I was calling Rickson a fraud. I said, you know, and the whole shtick of the video was, Rickson, please prove me wrong. Prove me wrong that you're not hanging out with this pedophile. And then my good friend Brandon Hetzler and Henry Akins, another black belt under Rickson, they started doing some more digging, and well, there was a few other guys in the group too. Homolo Barros in Hawaii. He's got 3 different rape convictions and flying the Rickson flag all day long. Then Scott Noggle. Scott Noggle was also a Rickson guy flying the Rickson flag. And by the way, today I went and looked at everybody's websites just to see if anybody's still flying the flag. And yeah, of course, David Armbeck from Warriors Cove, he's still flying the Rickson flag, saying he's teaching Rickson Gracie Jiu Jitsu. Got pictures of him and Rickson all over his website. Homolo Barros, same thing. So Scott Noggle actually went to prison because he was supposed to be on the registry and wasn't. So we got that one kind of taken care of. I'm not sure if he's out yet or not. I think he even might be out. Just unfortunate. But yeah, it's terrifying. And what was, you know, even Pedro Sauer eventually got a hold of me, who's one of Rickson's best friends. And, you know, he told me some stories that, you know, especially about Homolo Barros, that was just terrifying. Like, he wouldn't let his daughters be around him at all or anything. So it just goes to show they knew this guy was bad news, you know, but nobody really did anything about it. So
you think that?
So yeah.
So do you think that some of these areas are not just grooming, you know, I like to say survivors over victims, but they're not just like grooming the survivors and the people who are doing that. They're almost grooming or creating environments where like-minded people like them can somehow flourish as well. Is that what we're?
Definitely.
Okay.
It's a cult of power. Just don't get it twisted. It has every aspect of a cult, and it's a powerful one. It's almost like the mob in some sense. You know, the Gracie's roots run deep. And I was up against that wall in the very beginning. A lot of people kind of came out to me telling me I needed to shut up and to stop bruising the eye of jiu-jitsu, as some people told me. One guy, who I won't mention who it was, told me that Rickson was the living Buddha and that Rickson would never do anything wrong.
Okay.
Well, so I was like, we can't talk anymore.
Done.
Great.
Well done. You are really brave. And for me, you are a real black belt, because around, seriously, I see a lot of cowards. I see a lot of fake black belts, I tell you the truth. And I saw that during the Claudia Doval, you know, experience. And then maybe we would talk about that. But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying when you say that, you know, the Gracie family is like a cult. I'm actually very lucky because I train under, you know, Roger Gracie, and our academy, it's really good. We don't have this type of cases. I think he's very careful, and especially now he's actually helping a lot of, you know, women and supporting them. He was supporting Claudia. But seriously, I mean, I think that Rickson in this case is complicit. So I think that you cannot wash your hands. If you help and give visibility to rapists, to abusers, to people like this, you are complicit. You're guilty as well.
I completely agree. Again, I thought Rickson was Superman, you know, and you know, I do have a hold Pedro Sauer in high regard. He did help me get cut through a lot of that. There was a lot of haters out there, and Pedro kind of stood by me through a lot of that stuff, even though, you know, he's also standing right next to Rickson. So, you know, in their like groups and stuff, we kind of got them to agree to do background checks on people and stuff like that. Although, you know, again, these guys are still flying Rickson's flag. As soon as the pressure was off, it kind of went right back to what they were doing. I don't want to say necessarily Pedro Sauer, and all Gracies aren't created equal. There's a bunch of them. So for the new practitioner out there, they hear, oh, well, Gracie did this, and they automatically think all Gracies are bad. That's not necessarily true at all. But Rickson was in a place of power, and he put Preditors in a place of power also. and didn't really see a problem with it. The only problem that he saw with it was when it's, you know, kind of hurt his bank account, was hurting his image or whatever. And then once it was kind of died down, he's right back to being friends with all of them. So
yeah, that's the unfortunate part, and that's why we're having a conversation. Is when, you know, when Claudia's story hit the headlines, that's all anyone was talking about. But once it died down, it's almost like, oh, we're over it, let's move on to the next thing. One more question. I'm just doing I'm just talking on, but one of the things I want to ask too is, why do you think people we kind of touched on that, you know, we're tied to these, but like, why do people take these offenses so personally? It's like you're not accusing them, but it can be someone they've never met before. Like you all talked about how you have association with bigger names in the community, but like, for instance, me, I'm in a little town, and I've met people in my town that if I were to say, oh man, this person's terrible, they, you know, you've heard what they've done about sexual assault, and you would think I'm talking about them personally. Do you know why they take this?
Yeah, it's weird how people attach their own self-worth or identity or whatever to this. Again, it's kind of like a cult. It's very much, you know, that's human nature, is an interesting thing. And I think there's a reason that we have, you know, religion and stuff like that. We're constantly looking to be a part of a group that's bigger than ourselves. And when it comes to jiu-jitsu, it's a power group, and it's very alpha driven, so alpha male driven. Even though there's a lot of women in jiu-jitsu, it's obviously still a male dominated art. And it's a fighting art. So you're going to get these, you know, type A personality alpha males. And whenever somebody talks smack on one of their own, then they immediately jump to the defense of that, you know. And so, and then if there's no way that they can defend any longer, they immediately go quiet. So it's they never really want to admit or, you know, come to the light or anything like that. It's really sad. And I think it's even worse in jiu-jitsu than it is in, say, like gymnastics or other, you know, things that are where predators kind of reside. So yeah, it's a real problem. And that's why I make videos quite often about, you should always do background checks on your instructors, on anybody that's around your kids, and anybody that, you know, because you're right, you can do that. And so a lot of these guys have pasts, and if you don't know, you just don't know. And the turnover rate in jiu-jitsu is so high, you know, there's not a whole lot of like lifelong black belt people. It's mostly white belts and blue belts. And so people just don't know what they don't know. They get in, this guy is on the wall, we all bow to this one guy on the wall, and, you know, so it creates this mystique about them and everything that, you know, how if you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you're a black belt in life, you know, that's just not true. So, and our nature and human nature is to put people on pedestals, and, you know, and it's unfortunate, but it's the truth.
I think it's also like when you made a great association with jiu-jitsu and religion, and obviously the cult behavior runs deep in this sport, just like in a lot of smaller, kind of more entrenched communities. But I think what happens when you have an accusation like that floating around is what the integrity of the entire space becomes suspect. So you begin to suspect, well, could this person also be involved? Is there a cover up in place? Is my gym vulnerable? Am I not going to have my gym anymore? And if you're in a smaller town, or if jiu-jitsu is the only thing that's kind of, if it's your therapy, if it's the only thing you have to kind of look forward to, and you associate so much of yourself with the sport, when you are in danger of losing that, you probably will panic, and you might do anything to keep that space alive. If members of a church congregation know that their one church in the entire region is going to close down because of an allegation, they're probably going to do a lot to try and silence the person creating the allegation and just kind of stuff the whole story under the bed. So I just think that a lot of that behavior is alive. And also, we don't have, again, going back to office and corporate life, we don't have background checks on instructors. Anybody can open up a gym, and usually an instructor will hire their friends or people that they like or people that they see themselves in to help them and assist them and take over the gym if they need more instruction or if they decide to leave. And what happens is when you have friends, you will make unwarranted excuses for them. there are people who have drunk drivers, who have drunk driving friends who have killed people before, and they'll make an excuse and say he just had a bad night, even though his actions created terrible consequences for another family. We all kind of want to assume the best about our friends because we assume that we are good judges of character and our morality is tied to our friends. So when we have jiu-jitsu gyms that are just congregations of powerful black belts that are all friends, you're going to have a really hard time breaking that kind of initial grouping and getting everyone else to follow along.
Awesome.
I completely agree.
Yeah, but that's why I think it's more important than ever what men in the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu community do, you know, and especially men like you, Ty. So I think, you know, we need more men like you, more men outspoken against the bad ones, because I strongly believe we have more good ones than bad ones. I tell you the truth. So you just need to speak up. You need to put, you know, boundaries. You need to say, this is enough, put a limit. So if we will have more men like you who are brave enough to talk about these topics and to say, stop it to your, you know, friends, or say, you know, this is not acceptable, I'm sure the community will change. Because remember that abuse flourish in an environment that allows it to flourish. So if we put shame on the aggressors and we destroy their reputations, abuse stops. It will end immediately.
Yep.
Like
we did have a quick question. This isn't one of the ones we were going. We had a question that someone asked in the comments. If you guys can give me a quick little response to it. Someone asked, I think it's really related to what you were speaking of, Dom, is how can we raise awareness with the younger generation so they can start noticing these things on grooming and what's inappropriate behavior?
Stop idolizing your instructors. They are paid. What they're doing is providing a service. They're not gods. They're not leaders. They're not kings. They are people, and they make mistakes and they fuck up and they have flaws just like you. They're there to teach you jiu-jitsu and provide you a comfortable space to train in and oversee your training environment. You don't need to look at them for life advice, philosophy advice. You don't need to ask them to come to your wedding. You can have wonderful boundaries with yourself and your instructor, but it's up to people. It's a little bit up to the people that are choosing gyms also to make sure that they make the right decisions, that they're supporting the right people. We can throw our money towards Amazon and keep Bezos richer. We can throw our money towards small businesses. No, we have consumers, because that's what we are as jiu-jitsu students. We're consumers of the art. We need to figure out who we want to support, and it's really important that we do our research, who we decide to kind of partake in and interact in these spaces with.
Oh,
Absolutely.
that's perfect. I love that.
Anybody else want to add anything else to that?
I think she said everything. It's great. Never idolize anyone, seriously. Never, ever. And always, you know, understand your worth. Even if you're a white belt, I mean, you know, think about your own dignity. Think about, you know, I mean, your worth. You're worthy of being treated in a decent way, you know. So never allow anyone to do anything wrong to you or to cross boundaries.
Yeah, I also think a good point was brought up about, you know, you're paying them for a service. And I think for some reason, jiu-jitsu guys kind of flip this around on their students, like, oh, it's your honor to train with me type of thing, and you're lucky to be here and all that kind of stuff. No, the students are paying me for a service. And if I don't give the right kind of service or make them feel right, then they have every right to go somewhere else. And I think it's also important for us to really push for schools, all schools, some way, somehow, to start background checking their instructors. Like we background check our instructors here and our students. And we have that in our contract. We let them know, hey, listen, we're going to do a background check on you. And the only thing that we really care about is crimes against children and sexual assault. You know, everything else, you know, it could be, you know, there's a lot of, jiu-jitsu is a great reformer for things, right? I've seen a lot of people come and change their lives with jiu-jitsu. But one thing you cannot change is somebody who hurts children or who is using is sexual assault of some sort. And I think that is, unforgivable. There's a kind of a gray area about where maybe domestic assault and stuff like that, but yeah, I'm not going to let somebody come to my school who's got some sort of a background that is that I could enhance and make worse, because that's what we're doing. We're giving people a superpower, right? Oh, we're giving people power over others, like an extreme power. Jiu-jitsu is by far, in my opinion, the best martial art on the planet because of the ability to control your attacker. And you can pick the level of violence you put on your attacker. This is ultimate control. And so we cannot give this to, people that are going to turn it and use it for bad stuff. Jiu-jitsu doesn't necessarily make good people.
No.
It just doesn't. It amplifies people. So you got to be careful of what you're amplifying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what are some ideas or what are some things that we can do within our community to create a safe space for survivors to come forward and report this, so to kind of eliminate the stigma of being a victim of sexual assault in the community? Like, what are some things that academies can do, that we can do as practitioners, as students, as instructors? What are some ideas that you guys have that would allow that to happen more openly, to where we get potentially more people coming forward?
One thing that's really important for schools and school owners, because it's both sides of the fence here. You want to make sure that you're, if somebody accuses me of something, right, I want to be able to defend myself. And so I have cameras all over the place. This is important. This also makes the student feel safer, because they know if anything ever happened, there's going to be a record of it, and this just keeps everybody on the right path, I feel like. And then, of course, doing the background checks. I think so there has been a few people try to create websites and stuff. I just look at accredited schools or something like that are safe or whatever, but all that kind of stuff kind of falls apart because there's just not enough participation in it, So, but yeah, I'd be interested to hear any kind of advice on making it better. It's something we've been struggling with ever since we started outing all those people.
No, what you say, Ty, is great, and it's definitely a beginning. But let's be realistic. I think that many times these abusers, they don't really do it in the academy. Maybe they groom, the person there or online, like they're trying to do, with Dom, and then they choose another place eventually, like, what happened, unfortunately, with, Claudia. So abuse is really vicious. It's really vicious. It can happen. It's hidden. It happens everywhere, especially, in places where they are maybe dark or where there's no one around. So I think one important thing, thinking about the victim psychology, is to have a good community of other women or men like you, who are, supportive, who understand that this is an issue, that it's something real that happens in real world, sexual abuse. So an example, in our academy, we have this chat for the RGA ladies, as we call ourselves, not only for the London Academy, but for, the academies all over the world. And we are very close to each other, even if we don't meet each other, all the time. It never happened any case like this, but I am assuming that, if a woman or a girl, she feels threatened or abused, eventually she will feel comfortable in talking in a safe place, first of all, explaining what happened. So giving a safe place, a safe community is always something good. Unfortunately, many academies, they don't have so many women. And that's also, a catch-22 problem, because when there is a good environment, there are many, women signing in, so they can create this big community. Unfortunately, when there are not so many women, but it would be a good practice for all academies to have, classes only for women, and like a forum only for women. And eventually, I don't know, one instructor who is responsible to get their ideas and opinion in how to improve the community life. Because sometimes you can prevent these things, in my opinion, it's always better to prevent than, coming when it already happened. Maybe this could be something helpful.
I think everything you guys stated is spot on. Just to add, and I know this has been touched upon before, but I think it really, the way to curb abuse is like by starting at the root cause of it. Unfortunately, when abuse has already been spoken out about, we're already too late. It's already happened. And I think preventative measures are great, physical preventative measures that don't relate to people and social contact, but it all kind of falls on the person that is deciding to take action and create abuse. And unfortunately, we don't always know who those people are. They don't always look like dark, spooky people that are just like hiding in the shadows and wear like black cloaks and are waiting with a knife. Usually they're friends, usually they're coworkers, they're people that we think we're comfortable around, right? We feel safe around them. That's kind of the point of why they choose their abuse victims. So I think what needs to happen is we need to be better as a community of understanding who we want to kind of associate with and who we want to uplift and uphold as our spokespeople, as the people that we want to be representatives of jiu-jitsu and representatives of like positive academies and positive jiu-jitsu spaces. And that's difficult because we have to do a lot of our own research and we have to really kind of hold ourselves accountable for the kinds of choices that we make as students that are paying for a service, or as people paying for privates, or people paying for seminars, things like that. We have to make sure that the people we're supporting are people that have our values in mind as well and are ethical and
Forward.
this is all very difficult to do, but I think with time, it'll naturally be the process that happens. Unfortunately, in New York, we had a case where an instructor that was teaching at a New York City gym was accused by several students of sexual misconduct. And I spoke with some of the people that accused him and spoke about their experiences. And the way that it was handled was very hush hush. It was handled in a very like, we're going to send this person off. We're going to basically almost host them a going away party and let them go back to Brazil and live their life over there and not really take any action. And the amount of people that stayed afterwards at that academy is quite shocking. A lot of people did leave, but a majority stayed. And that's kind of what happens when we have these allegations occur. And I think it's really up to the people. It's up to the people to uplift a culture that supports abuse or decide to take themselves out of it and move towards something more positive and lighter, which is difficult to do because, again, accountability, it's your choice. You have to choose who you support, and it's difficult to make those decisions. But I think with time, we're seeing more and more amazing instructors come out. Ty, you're someone that's incredibly brave to me for just speaking out about somebody that's so just jiu-jitsu royalty, essentially. You must have had so many instances where people are trying to discredit you or talk you down, but here you are, and you're creating a wonderful platform for people to come out and speak their mind about these things. And you're also probably creating a wonderful space for your students. Same with you, Paola. You created a platform for people to talk about these things and try to kind of spread awareness about the things that are happening in jiu-jitsu, because every community has its seedy underbelly. So I think with time, we're noticing more people decide that it's time for the community to change. It's time for us to move away from like supporting and allowing abuse to flourish and thrive. So I think with time, we'll definitely see a lot of change, but it starts small. It starts with the individual.
No, absolutely. And that kind of moves into my next thought is, what responsibility do we have as being a member of this community? What responsibility do we have to ensure that this doesn't continue, to speak out when we see something, to address it, with the owners or the instructors or whoever may be in the power position that's not directly involved? Like, what kind of responsibility do I have, do you have in the roles, do the people listening have in putting an end to this and making this a non-issue within our community?
That's a great question, Shauna, seriously, because the answer is that all of us, each one of us has a huge responsibility. A huge responsibility. Even if you're the last, white belt who just signed up, for the academy, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you're an instructor or not. I mean, each of us has a responsibility. So we have to talk if we see something wrong. We have to talk if something wrong happens to us. If we have to talk if one of our friends or our buddies, you know, our training partners does something wrong. That's how you really are brave, because indifference is a problem. Indifference is from indifference that comes, you know, racism, sexism, and all the horrible other things in life. You know, the other day was the Memorial Day for the Holocaust, and I was reading again this wonderful speech of Elie Wiesel, you know, and it's about the perils of indifference. And it's fantastic because, you know, it shows you that what happened in the Holocaust was, you know, happened because there were few bad people, and then the other part of the community was indifferent to the pain of the victims. They were just, you know, putting the blind eye and turning their head the way around. And in my opinion, these people are cowards. I don't care which bloody color of your belt you have, but you're a coward if you don't speak up, if you don't, you know, do something. So 100% we are all responsible.
Yep. Totally agree with that.
Did you got either one of you want to add more? I take someone like you, Ty. It seems like you took a responsibility to speak out as a male in the community. You were under no obligation, like no one, there's as many others in your position who remain silent. Some of them feel like it's not their place because it's not happening to them, yet you felt responsible enough to make it your work to call people out and to speak out.